Wait till Peter finishes his cookie.
We'll get Commissioner Talcott to come back.
His hand in the cookie jar.
All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and if you just stand with me, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we do roll call, we have a new commissioner to swear in, and we'll take care of that right now. So I'm going to come around to the front here, and I'm going to ask if Deb Evans would join me. And we're excited to have Deb on the board. This is very short and sweet. Okay, will you raise your right hand? We face the flag here. There you go. There you go. All right. I, Deb Evans, do solemnly swear and affirm that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Montana, and that I will discharge the duties of my office of Commissioner in and for the Great Falls International Airport Authority of Great Falls, Montana, with fidelity. Congratulations. Thank you.
Not today. Well, I've never been sworn into anything.
Wait until you see the fine print contract afterwards. All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and have roll call. Commissioner Evans.
Present.
Commissioner Talcott.
Present.
Commissioner Swenson is not here. Commissioner Trapila.
Present.
Commissioner Kotrawitz is absent. Here he goes. Oh, he is here. Commissioner Kotrawitz, you are here. All right, and Commissioner Robinson?
Present.
And Commissioner Moran is here. Thank you. All right. We'll go to the consent agenda, and I think before the director's report, we'll have the election of officers. So let's go right to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is made up of routine day-to-day items that require board action but do not appear to have a significant public impact. Items may be pulled from the consent agenda for separate discussion vote by any board member. Approval of the board minutes from January 29th, 2013. We have payroll checks totaling $72,063.98. We have maintenance and operation checks totaling $661,131.41. We have passenger facility charges totaling $43,000. And included in your packet was the financial reports for January. Chair would entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion on the consent agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, if any? Very good. Motion passes. All right. Each year we have the election of officers for chair and vice chair of the Great Falls International Airport Board. At this time, the office of chair is open, and we would entertain a motion for chair. Any motion for chair?
I move that we retain Jim Warren as chair.
Second.
Any discussion? Any discussion?
Questions?
Question has been called. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, if there be any? All right, well, thank you for that. Appreciate that. At this time, we would entertain the position of vice chair.
Mr. Chairman, I move that Owen Robinson remain vice chair.
Motion for Owen Robinson for Vice Chair. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor of Commissioner Robinson for Vice Chair?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed if there be any? Very good, thank you. Well, thank you, Board, for your sustaining vote, and hopefully we can continue to move forward as we have in the past. At this time, we would look to Director Faulkner for the Director's report and anything that you want to add under the capital funding plan.
Absolutely, and we have, I'll hand around a revised capital plan. As I said, I've been saying in the last couple of Director's reports, the FAA came up about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and our engineer came up from Denver, and we sat down and went through our 6-year CIP. This is the time of the year when FAA does their financial planning for next year's grants. That is fiscal year 2014 for the federal budget, and they start looking ahead a year or two to begin planning discretionary dollars. And so it's a normal planning cycle where we sit down with them and review the program. And as we've said in the past, we sort of mold the program to when we think the FAA will have discretionary monies available. Those are the grants that we compete for rather than the grants that we receive automatically. We receive about $1.7 million automatically every year based on our passenger level, and then we receive discretionary dollars that have to compete in the national system for specific projects. So we have done some shuffling in the capital program that you see here. In the previous month, we had a slightly different program. In talking to the FAA, it looks as though they're going to have discretionary dollars available to us next year for 1634. So that's our big program that we are planning to move ahead with next year in 2014 construction season. So you see that that's still the dominant item in the capital program. And we moved around a few things. The second phase of the snow equipment building. We've also moved the road program. We had about 4 years from now a road program where we would do some roadway widening and potentially move the exit road. We've now moved that up a little bit to 2015, so we have an exit road relocation along with expansion of the parking. That's the program we talked about over the last couple months, where we would take the exit road and more or less swerve it around the back of the water tower lot, and then the exit from the terminal would become the whole exit where everybody would exit would be relocated to where the airplanes are parked over there near Mang. And then the current exit road that you're used to driving on today would become the parking lot toll plaza. So what that allows us to do is to take that water tower lot and pull it into our commercial parking lot, and that gets about 350, 370 stalls more that we can have in the parking lot. So those are a few of the highlights of the moving around we did. The majority of the project stayed the same. The program for next year, the project stayed the same. We updated the numbers based on our engineers' estimates, and so those numbers have changed. But this is the 6-year capital program we are planning on moving forward with. It does change several times a year, like I said, as we meet with the FAA, but we did want to give you an updated copy of that. In addition to that, we also have a budget update on the terminal building we'll pass around. This is the one we've been providing monthly to kind of show some of the change orders that we've encountered over the last month. We did have a couple of them that we've talked about in the weekly report. The first was in the February timeframe. We spent about $1,000 to accommodate some changes to the soffit. There were some elevation differences there that we had to do, and it cost us about $1,300. And then in addition to that, there was an $830 credit. We decided not to put a badging system on the elevator. Right now, we're entirely on a key access system. Everything is accessed through a key that's issued to employees. If we go to a badging system, we either have to come up with a proximity ID, or we have to go to a magnetic stripe ID in order to accommodate a card reader. If we do that, those systems are extremely expensive. Even the ID badges, the badge itself with the technology in it, costs about $25. when you order them in small quantities like we would be ordering them. So we've decided to put that decision off and keep our low-tech system for the time being. My opinion on security is I would be more happy to have cameras than I would to have intelligent badges and that type of thing, because typically in an airport it's not a question of whether or not the person has access to those things. It's who left those things open that you're trying to solve. Most of the time a key system works pretty well, but it's equally as important to know who's been accessing those doors and who left it open and that type of thing. And security cameras do better for that type of work than the badge readers, because oftentimes the door, you think it's shut but it didn't really shut, and when TSA finds that and somebody gets a fine, then it's either the airport pays it or we find out who did it. And so we at this point would rather invest in a system that we already have keys, and if we did make any kind of security purchase, it would probably be more along the lines of cameras. So we took an $830 credit for that. And then the last thing we mentioned in previous months, when they opened up the back of the building, for whatever reason that third floor expansion area was not fire coded under the deck. We're still working to determine how that'll be resolved. But in addition to that, there was a couple of spots under there for, I can't think of any reason why it was done this way, but a couple of the pieces of the sheet metal over near the children's play area on the decking were not sprayed. Everything around them was sprayed. So they must have had some kind of forms or something up there when they sprayed that blocked that area. Maybe it was installed later, improperly installed and replaced. But there were several areas in there where there was fireproofing on all sides, but just one set of sheet metal that wasn't. So we went ahead and had the contractor, while they were here to fireproof the new space, fireproof those existing areas, and that cost us about $9,700. We figure it's just wise to, while they're here, do that. If we're going to have to spray the third floor decking that extends out over the building, that'll be a sizable change order. The contractor estimated that one at over $100,000, because they've got to pull the cladding off the entirety of the building, that concrete cladding. When you go out there and look, there's kind of a deck, and there's a piece of concrete precast over it, and then there's some concrete underneath to close the soffit. That's all got to come off, and then they've got to spray that all the way around. We don't know for certain that's what's going to happen. We're still working with the building department to see how the fireproofing was achieved, or if we needed to fireproof that area based on our current, how the building's zoned and classified in the city code. But there is, kind of a lurking issue out there that is yet unresolved. And we could, certainly show anyone that if they're interested in seeing it. There's a good long stretch there where you see just metal extruding out, not covered. The rest of the metal around it, the old stuff, is all covered with fireproofing. So, I don't know, Ron, anything you'd add to that?
Well, we'll meet with the city on this additional stuff next Tuesday. We have a meeting with the city building inspector, Craig Raymond. So we'll find out what his position is on that, on this additional stuff here. That, on that $9,000 stuff, some of that also includes where they remove the fascia and stuff, like on the ground level, where they took that concrete off. There's actually steel structure that held that up, and that's kind of more or less a batch job on filling some of that in, and some of this area back here where some original ducting was removed, where it wasn't fireproofed behind the ducting, so just kind of more or less some patch stuff. But the big one would be it's kind of this whole area where they extended the floor decking out for the third floor. But
What's your engineer or architect say?
Well, the architect is trying to work on the building classification, because the way I understand it, if they can classify it as a mall, it wouldn't necessarily have to have the fireproofing. Because most of the spaces in a mall and our space, the majority of the space is not permanently occupied like an office building where you need to have a 1 or 2 hour rating. We're like a mall full of exits and entrances in the event of a fire that you can get out of. And so the thinking is, if we can treat the building like a mall, an open air mall, that possibly it wouldn't have to be fireproofed. They've also been looking at the construction means to see if encasing that with concrete one way or another met the 2-hour rating or 1-hour rating, whatever that wall had to be. You know, if the system in a whole somehow met that rating. That's what the engineer and architect have been working on in the last month or so to try and figure out how the intent of the fireproofing worked to get it to be constructed the way it was, because that was only 5 years ago?
10 years ago.
Was it 10 years ago?
Yeah.
But you know, so it's not, we're not like we're dealing with an archaic building code. You know, it should have probably met a fire rating, and that's what they've been trying to determine is how that was met.
But if it's a different classification, it wouldn't need the fire?
That's apparently the case. If we can treat it as an outdoor, or as an open air mall, then because it's not an occupied space necessarily, you don't have somebody working, you know, constantly in that space. The thinking is it's probably could meet the rating as it is now.
I would just suggest get your ducks in a row before you bring in someone from outside,
Yeah,
that being the city, because there's a lot of gray areas in the code.
right.
You can interpret it any way you want.
Yeah, and that's what
There's a lot of
LP
ways to interpret it, and we know as long as, you know, our interpretation isn't wrong,
right.
and we can leave it the way it is, and it makes sense, then so be it. I mean,
Right.
if you can't say, shoot a hole in it, then
that's-
it's no different than coming in and saying it has to be fireproof, then all of a sudden we're tens if not hundreds of $1,000s out.
Yep.
That's really good
So
counsel.
take the, you know, let's have all our ducks in a row before we, don't ask, tell.
Right, and that's what
Well,
LPW.
here's the way it is.
Right.
You show us where we're wrong. If
Right.
we can't tell you're wrong, you're not.
Right, and that's what LPW has been doing, is trying to line up that argument and understand the system. And I think CTA was the
CTA was the architect.
Yeah, and
of
they've
the addition
they've
and
contacted them to kind of get some
remodel.
details on it too.
So we're not sure why that was left out. And then there's some structural improvements, you know, that weren't fireproofed, where they reinforced some of the steel structure, original steel structure, and that's just basically welded on some of these beams and stuff that just to strengthen them. And so that was some of the things they're looking at, but we don't know what, or haven't been able to find through CTA or the city of why, you know, just that one small area was not, or if it needed, or they've determined it wasn't needed.
I mean, the strange thing about it is that piece of it hangs outside the building. So if you're looking at fire below it, trying to light it, you know, light on it, you've got concrete construction around the back of the building. It's unlikely that anything would burn up to there, but it is the floor space of the floor above it. So, you know, it is space that potentially people are on and standing on and occupying. It's just an odd situation.
GC.
Why in the world do non-combustibles like steel and concrete need to be fireproof?
That's a good question.
Well, like the steel, I asked that question too, you know, steel, I guess, once it gets hot, it doesn't burn, but it collapses, it weakens it in a fire where your whole building will just basically cave in, so.
Yeah, but by that point in time, you ought to be
Well, you
at least
should-
aware enough that your shoes are getting hot. I think.
Yeah, you should be, but.
It's the opposite of what you would think, because by design, it takes a while for a big wooden member to burn through and fail. Where if you get a hot enough heat, steel will go like that. So it doesn't burn, but it gets to a point where it becomes liquid and it fails, where you can put a heat to a chunk of wood and it takes a long time for you to burn enough of it where it loses its strength. So it's kind of opposite of what you would think.
But in any event, we're up to just under $200,000 out of the contingency budget spend in total. You know, ignoring the testing budget, which was our, you know, add to the project, and the terrazzo, which was just an option to add the additional terrazzo work. We're at about 1.5% change orders on the original construction cost. We have $248,000 remaining in the contingency budget. Our hope is that now that we're sort of exiting the phase of construction where we're working on the existing structure, and the vast majority of the value will be added to new structure, that at this point the number of change orders will be slowing down precipitously, and we'll be on to completing the work. So right now, in terms of total spending, we're about halfway through the project. In terms of time frame, we're approaching that same milestone too. And we're about 2 weeks behind schedule in talking to the contractor. They feel that we remain about 2 weeks back. So.
And you don't see, for the benefit of the board here, you don't see this remaining contingency as a problem for us that we would extinguish that before?
No, I don't think so, and I was going to mention it next on the list, but I can say now, Rod bought a loading bridge for us. We found a reconditioned bridge. Total budget for that's about what, Ron? Is it?
I paid $221, I think.
So $221, we had budgeted $350 in case we wanted to buy a new one. So we're going to save another $130,000 out of the budget up above. Right there, so we've got another $130 available in terms of total project budget. Of course, we don't plan to spend that. And in fact, when Delta finally gets up to see us, they've canceled a couple times now, but the Delta rep, properties rep from Atlanta is supposed to be coming to see us at some point next month. I think it's the 13th. And we want to talk to them about replacing loading bridge on Gate 1. You know, they have that 1976 original bridge from when the terminal opened, and just again this week it broke. So we're hoping they would consent to putting another bridge out there. So we may take, as we get to the end of this project, we'd hope to maybe have enough savings to buy an additional loading bridge and get that one replaced. And at that point, I think we'd have a decent stable of bridges that we could count on. The United Bridge is brand new. The Minneapolis Bridge is still pretty good shape. Even Gate 3, where Alaska and Allegiant are, that bridge is in pretty good shape. And then one of those carriers, Alaska or Allegiant, will relocate to the new gate once it opens, probably in the fall. So I think at that point we'd have a pretty good set of bridges that we could count on. But yeah, the Salt Lake Bridge or the Minneapolis Bridge is in pretty rough shape, you know, being as old as it is. It seems like it's wiring and motors mostly that are failing, and you know, it's
getting
maybe
more and more costly,
yeah.
And then you're into the conversion mode where you're converting motors, and it's a DC system, convert it to AC, then you're talking, you know, tens of thousands of dollars to upgrade it for, you know, how long's the rest of it going to last?
It's near the end of its life.
And then it's all dated technology, of course, that changes fast.
Anything else on the budget board, John?
And then I was going to mention a little bit the tower closure. As I reported in the last couple weekly reports, the FAA has released a national list. Actually, there's two lists of towers that are being studied. The studies will last between March and May. And they'll be looking at some towers that will close permanently. Kalispell and Helena were on that list. And then other towers where they're looking at reduced hours. They published for us a potential closure between 8 p.m. and I believe 6 a.m. Is the proposed closure. Today, during that time frame, we have about 3 commercial flights. About 200 or 300 people come in during that time period. This summer we'll have about 400 people that will land during that time period of a potential closure. And so we've expressed reservations to the entire delegation. A couple of the staffers have emailed back and asked for further details. I believe even this week the tower closures are going to come up in an aviation subcommittee meeting that Congressman Daines serves on. And I'm told that there might be some direct questions asked about the safety of that. So we'll look forward to that testimony. But the studies will last between now and May. At that point, they'll determine if they're going to close any towers, and then the closure would occur sometime this fall, right around October, is what we're told. Like I said, I think the worst impact for us really is the potential that some commercial flights could be coming in without a tower. From what I'm told, talking to area pilots, Salt Lake Center can only see down to about 600 feet above the runway. So that last 600 feet, you're pretty much on your own. Should a vehicle or an airplane stray out onto the runway without radio contact with Salt Lake Center, there is potential for an incident. And so we've pointed that out as a real safety concern to the delegation, that one of the reasons we don't think this is a safe plan. Contrary to some other airports in the country, at night we continue to have military operations. You're probably all aware of the Malmstrom helicopters that operate in our airspace at very low elevations. It's unlikely Salt Lake Center can see those when they come down the river corridor, because we are 300 and some odd feet above the city. And those radars that they operate off of do not have visibility down that low. It'd be lost in the shadow of trees, towers, buildings, and everything else. So there are operations in the middle of the night that will not be seen by Salt Lake Center. The Black Hawk helicopter that's operated by DHS is another. And when you mix slow vertical takeoff aircraft with faster moving jet aircraft, that's where you have the real potential. Without a tower operator in the tower to separate those different operations, you have a real potential for some type of incursion. So we're really concerned about this. We think it's a real possibility, and we're doing our best to try and get the word to our delegation to make sure they're aware of it.
Well, in addition, there's no way the tower down in Salt Lake can run the Cat 3 lights.
Well, we would lose capability after 8 p.m. That's true also. Yeah, it's impossible to run a Cat 3 system without a tower.
The other thing you got here too is animals. I mean, it's not just the, the vehicles. You get deer and occasional bear. And,
Coyotes, and you name it. And even birds. Salt Lake Center isn't going to see a flock of birds. It's not as bad of a problem at night, but certainly in the summertime, 8 p.m. is daylight hours and prime feeding hours.
GC.
As a point of information, the white dome that's out by Bootlegger Trail, up on the bluff north of town, that's the radar dome for Center. But additionally, there are some airlines whose company policy is not to land at non-towered airports. So that could be a real deciding factor right there.
And at a minimum, their insurance is going to go up.
I don't know which airlines they are.
Well, I pointed that was another thing I pointed out in the email I sent to the delegation, that it really questions the long-term viability of these airports for commercial operations. Helena today is uncontrolled at night, and Alaska does land there after the tower closes on occasion. If they're late, they have landed there.
I think they close at 11, and Verizon doesn't leave here till
about
11:30.
Are there any flights that come in here after midnight?
Not now, but
Between midnight and 6 a.m.?
Well, the
One
closure
mail
they're talking about
carrier.
is 8 p.m.
Well,
But there's a lot of
That's
FedEx
all.
planes that come in.
Yeah.
FedEx comes in
FedEx does come in.
5:30, so it missed that one also.
Yeah, but I mean, if they really want to close, if they are so determined, maybe they could be pushed into a midnight to 6 a.m. scenario, which would keep the tower open during our aircraft operation time.
Yeah, and that's what we would ultimately push for if we're going to go this route. Then there's the contract tower program, which other airports are in. And I know other airports in that program have paid for additional hours. So in other words, if they say your closure is 8 p.m., if that's what the FAA were to say, the only thing I could think of is we could try to go to a contract tower and get to a midnight closure.
Well, on that closure list that I sent around, there were contract towers.
Which I find that really interesting. I don't know how that would function. I've actually sent some emails around to some friends of mine in the industry to find out what they mean by that. Would they just take away the federal funding? Because in most cases, the airports are paying some of that contract cost. I don't know what they mean by a closure of a contract tower. Are they just not going to allow it? Or are they going to remove the funding? Or what is the intent of that? Because Glacier Park International, Kalispell, is one of the airports that is a contract tower and is on the closure list. So a lot of questions to be asked.
So John, do you have any kind of a sense on time frame on this?
Yeah, we should hear the outcome of the study in May, is what I'm told, or maybe June by the time they formulate everything. But it should be coming up here in the next few months. we've done just internally, we've looked at the impact on our operations, and we would likely have to set up a third shift if we lost the tower at night, because tonight we don't have anyone on the airfield, but because the tower is here, we use Securitas to backfill that. The tower has enough field awareness that if something happens, they contact us. Without the tower on site at night, in the fall, for example, if they did close our tower, we would need to have someone on the field that has capability to deal with any airport situation. So I think we were looking at a budget impact of $80,000. Most likely, we would have to put somebody in for a third shift here at the airport. When it snows, we do have folks here. When it doesn't, no one's here.
John, I'm sorry, I was familiar with that midnight closing idea. What hours did you say this was proposed, 8?
The actual proposed study time is 8 p.m. until 5
Oh,
a.m.
until 5 a.m.
Yeah, and in my email to the delegation, I pointed out that in the summertime, for example, they're studying between March and May, which is a terrible time of year to study in Montana because it's after ski season and before summer, so it is literally the low part of the year. And our flights move accordingly. So right now, we only have 3 flights in that time of night after 8 p.m. If you look at the summertime, we have up to 5 flights during that 8 to midnight time period. And about 400 people arrive here, which is 2/3 of the people that come to Great Falls in an entire day. So that was one of the things I pointed out to the delegation is we're increasing the risk. There's no two ways to look at it. For nearly 2/3 of the people that would land at this airport, during that time period.
Okay, anything else for
Just
John?
one question, contract tower, is that just hiring our own people?
Yeah, it's a program that's been allowed by the FAA, and typically it's where they've either abandoned a tower or they've cut back the service so severely that the airport said we need something different. And folks that are advocates for the contract tower would say it's much more efficient cost-wise because there's less controllers, the overall cost is lower. People that are not advocates for it point out that a lot of times those controllers don't have nearly the experience or training that the trained FAA controllers do.
Yeah, Brad, there are companies that contract with the federal government to run those towers, just like the flight service station, Lockmart is doing with flight service stations, and they'll run the towers. But I can't see, it doesn't make any sense to me when this company signs a contract with the FAA for X number of dollars, how they're going to be affected in the staffing of the tower when they already have that in their budget and,
I don't.
one penny on $100 is hardly reason to close things down.
I don't know that it makes sense, that the way these things are looked at. Honestly, it'll be very. I mean, when you really think about it, all you're doing is eliminating a job here that someone has to do in Salt Lake City. Right? I mean, somebody is still watching the airfield. They're just doing it 800 miles away in a market with a more expensive cost of living and probably a higher wage and a higher class within the federal air traffic controller system. Now, there is some efficiencies because not only will they be watching the Great Falls approach, they'll be watching Bozeman, Missoula, Helena, potentially Kalispell, and 1 or 2 other markets. But again, when something's happening at more than one airport, is it really safe? I mean, I think that's a question that we should be asking, and I'm not convinced that there's any real decrease in cost when you consider all the factors.
It's all for political gain, the whole thing. If there's no cost savings, there's no financial catastrophe about to happen. It's just all.
Well, certainly the work doesn't vanish. I'll say that. Somebody's still doing the work somewhere. And until that moves over to a third world country, I suppose it's probably not being done any cheaper than it's being done here.
Well, we'll hear the full report in May, right, on this?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Ship it to Las Vegas.
And then Did you have?
I do have one other thing.
Okay.
We're evaluating a frontier change in the schedule. They're proposing, a year ago when we were talking about their schedule for this upcoming year, their policy was they would not leave airplanes overnight in other markets. They would keep bringing them home to Denver every night. They're considering a change to that policy, and they've told us that they would like to potentially overnight a plane here, which would open up a number of new connections, including Cancun, San Diego, some other areas that I think would be really attractive. Unfortunately, that does come with a change to their schedule. Last year they flew Monday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. What they're planning now would be Monday, Wednesday, Friday departures, which means the plane comes in the night before. So we end up with one less flight a week, but I think that overall schedule is probably a net gain. Because they would they would be here every day of the week except for Saturday and Sunday, either coming in or out. But it would open up a lot more connections. I looked at the list today, and there's about twice as many cities that we could connect to if they do it this way. So we're looking at that right now and trying to evaluate if that's a good deal. The one thing it does do is it forces us to try and get the new airline gate open because we have every plane overnights here on our gate. So if they're going to overnight a plane, we need a new parking spot, and so Rod has been working with the contractor trying to get the either a temporary occupancy certificate or just get that hold room all the way open by May in order to allow the plane to use that hold room. So we'll continue to report on that, but we are looking at the schedule change. I think our consultant's recommending that it's a better schedule, and overall I think it is. We're just trying to make sure that we think that we'll sustain the benefit we had last summer and get additional benefits with these new cities. And then lastly, just on airport activity, January was up about 1.2%, so more or less flat. We expect February, although February has looked really busy, we expect February, March, and April to be down about 5,000 passengers between those 3 months because of the reduction in the Allegiant flying this spring. Across the state, they're just doing less flying. They had planned to buy some airplanes. They only got about half the airplanes they wanted to buy. And so they just don't have the lift they did a year ago. They're making the conversion from MD-80s to 319s. And as of yet, it's taken a little longer than they expected. So we'll have some less seats between now and summer. And then in summer, we have extra seats because Allegiant is planning on bringing more segments this summer. So I think we'll face a little bit of a headwind in growth the next few months. Hopefully we'll pick that back up in the summer.
Okay, great report. Any questions on the capital improvement plan, the budget, or anything else that Director Faulkner covered? Anything at all? All right, good. We'll move to the number 2 action item, which is the change order on airport improvement 53 Schedule 2. This has to do with the airfield drainage we talked about in last month's work session, and it's also in your board packet, and we're looking for a motion to approve that change order. So the chair would entertain said motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed if there be any by the same sign? Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is action item to consider the contract extension for Phase 2 wooden hangar for AvMax. And this is the lease extension. And John, why don't you, just for the benefit of Commissioner Evans and just as a refresher, sure, just give us a little update on that.
Sure. The AvMax has been at the airport now for about 10 years. They have a couple buildings over there. They renovated the concrete hangar, the old World War II concrete hangar, and that's their main base of operations. They also renovated a shell of a metal building into a paint shed. And then this is the third building. It's an old wooden hangar. It has some structural issues. A couple of the trusses are starting to give way, but they use it to store planes more or less. That's the main use in there. They hope to one day renovate it and use it as a maintenance hangar, but more or less now it's just semi-warm storage, I guess is the way to put it. They also have a 4th phase, which we'll talk about next, to take a second of those metal shells and turn it into another paint hangar. But their 5-year lease has expired on this wood hangar. They would like to continue using the wood hangar in the same capacity. We have no other use for it. It's like I said, it's operationally in pretty rough shape, but works pretty well for their uses, so we'd like to extend that lease to another 5 years.
Right. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion on the motion?
What are the terms? Were they predetermined as option?
Well, they have a 5-year lease, and the rent on that is about $5,920 for the land, and then another $9,178 for the building. So we end up about $15,000 a year in the total revenue for us, which isn't too bad of a deal. Like I said, the building itself, it's got a number of issues. The doors don't work particularly well.
Rear doors.
Rear doors don't work at all because that's where the truss is sagging. It's beautiful. I mean, there's some incredible craftsmanship in there, but you know, the tile on the outside I think is asbestos. The shingle on the outside, I mean, it
Needs some roof work.
yeah, the roof leak's pretty good. Yeah.
I think what Brad was asking is how does it compare with the lease price?
Oh,
Yeah.
Is that right, Brad? I don't mean to speak for you, but.
they pay our standard ground rent, and then we add to that the building rent about $9,000. I'd say, you know, so that's total for the hangar of about $15,000 a year. I'd say that's a pretty decent market rate for that hangar. I mean, if it had more capability, you know, certainly you could pay up for that. But that hangar's only, is it about what, 25,000 square feet? Would you say?
Yeah, it must be close to that. I don't know.
What did you used to pay, Dwight?
Pardon me?
What did you used to pay?
I was just thinking about that, but I'd have
More
to,
than that.
I
Was
was
it?
wondering.
For the wood hangar, or really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it's more.
The other thing is, I don't think it has a heating system at
No,
all.
Avmax has put some 4-unit heaters in the back, and then they curtain off part of it, but when it's real cold, they can't work in there. They just use it for airplanes. They're up on jacks, no landing gear, and things that'd be in the way in the other hangar, kind of. But
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Ben?
Back in summer 2007, there was like a $2 million grant from the federal government for, I thought it was phase 2, which eventually would bring that up. Is that still an active?
No, what happened was there was some EDA money that was made available if we wanted to renovate that. It wasn't even half what the project budget would be. That, to be honest with you, I wouldn't touch that building with a 10-foot pole. I'd tear it down and rebuild. It would be much cheaper, and you'd have a functional building. You know, and so the EDA money, there was a grant that the state did approve. Avmax decided at the time they didn't want to undertake the project, and so that expired, I think, about a summer ago, or maybe it was 2 summers ago, about 2 years ago.
Now that's the federal grant?
No, it's a state EDA grant.
Okay, because Max Baucus was here and there was a federal EDA grant also of roughly $2 million. Lori, do you remember that?
I
know they had a big dog and pony show.
Yeah, that was just the 1.2 million.
Or 1.2, okay.
Yeah.
But that's still,
No,
No,
it had
that's
to,
all
they had to
expired.
move forward with their project. It was
Okay.
tied into the project and they didn't, so that expired and is gone.
okay.
And that had to be repaid. That wasn't a grant, it was a loan, was it not?
I don't think it did have to be
Okay.
repaid, but we had to save the windows.
I can tell you, in a
and
building that
all
size, you know, 1.2 million, you've got, you know, they wanted to preserve the windows because they're, yeah, the historical value of the window. And then you're dealing with asbestos remediation, lead paint. I mean, that 1.2 million would have gone so quick, you'd be lucky to. I mean, I bet the budget on that project had to have been over 4 million, wasn't it?
Yes.
3 something.
3 point, yeah.
And it's a little over 20.
29,000 square feet.
All right. Dwight?
John, is there a time frame for this lease? Is it month to
5
month?
years.
So it's another 5 years.
Yeah.
Is there a cancellation clause?
Remember, Laura, if there's,
On both parties? I would have to look at
by who, us, or them, you
that.
mean?
Both parties?
Either party.
I don't think we have a 30-day on it, or I would have to check to
Oh,
be sure.
just on the
Actually,
court,
I
I
guess
just
I could probably look here.
more informational.
Was there an option for AvMax to buy that building?
There is an option in it, there's a purchase option in the contract.
Yeah, I've talked to them about that in Calgary with their CFO, and I think the general thinking of us and them is if we were gonna do anything, the building would go. It just isn't cost effective. You're still gonna end up with a wood structure that's 70 years old.
All right, any other questions? All right, there's a motion on the table. Any other questions? All in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed if there be any? Motion passes, thank you. Item number 4, AvMax Phase 4, second paint shelter project. You want to give us a little
Sure,
update on that?
at about the first of the year, we were contacted by AvMax. We have that second metal three-sided structure that is an old alert barn from the Guard that was moved over there about 2008 timeframe. And the AvMax would like to proceed with a project to create a second paint hanger. The project would include tying it into the air handling system that exists today on the first paint hanger. It was all sized for that and envisioned when that system was put in, so that should work out okay. The new hangar would accommodate up to a 737, I believe 400, so it would get several of the different lines of 737 that could fit in there. And so over the last couple of months, we've been looking at the plans and talking to AvMax about how this project could proceed. The plans were completed back in 2008 and actually bid. And so the construction documents are there. There has been a code update since then. There's 2010, I believe, Universal Fire Code and that kind of thing. So the design drawings need to be reviewed one more time prior to commencing construction. In addition to that, AvMax has also determined they'd like to have a bathroom and a break room added to the project. So what we've talked to CTA about, who did this design, was finding a location to stub utilities, and then that use would probably come through a modular of some kind, where we would put a more permanent mobile unit there, but something that would be designed for a big break room, meeting room, and a bathroom for those employees that are doing the painting. So that's adding some design cost. We're currently estimating it would cost about $50,000 to $60,000 to complete the plans. So what we've done is we've sent AvMax a lease amendment to Phase 1, which is the concrete hangar. The board in previous action had determined that we didn't want to extend any more of our credit out on the AvMax projects because we have about $250,000 in design costs and the cost to build the foundation for that three-sided hangar, cost to move it down there that's already spent that we're not recovering. So what we're proposing here in sort of supplementary rent 2 is we would extend that additional $50,000 to $60,000 and add that into the rent on the first phase that they're paying today, and then they would repay that to us over 5 years so that we can begin collecting our money back right away on that additional extension of credit. We're amortizing that at 6%. To the extent that they get financing for their project, we would allow them to take that financing out and repay our money sooner, or they could just continue to pay this additional rent. And then what we're envisioning for the remainder of that money, that about $250,000 that was extended back in 2008 for the project, we would add that into the ground rent on the new building, which would add about $1,050 a month. And then as they repay the ground rent, they would be repaying us for our design investment in the first design program that was done in 2008. That's the best way to describe it. I think the only one we really need action on today is supplementary rent 2, which will add to the existing lease through an amendment, and then we'll give CTA the go-ahead to review those plans, add in the utility stubs, and be prepared to bid that project if AvMax chooses. That's how we plan to finance the completion of the design.
So now, are you wanting a cap on the design costs in the motion?
I think so. It's looking like now it might be 60,000. 50,000 was where we thought we were before, but now AdMax has added a couple new elements to the project with the wanting to add that modular building for bathrooms. So we think probably now 60,000, would be adequate. And what we're going to do is we've got a lease amendment in the, it's drafted already. There's an exhibit in there that has the dollar amount. When we know what the final costs are, we'll substitute the new exhibit for the old exhibit, and they'll just pay based on the actual cost amortized over 5 years at 6%.
And then just for further clarification, supplementary one, rent one does not kick in until the building is functional?
Right, and so that one we can deal with in the lease when we bring the lease to the board.
Right.
We'll just simply have that in the lease agreement for the second paint hanger that we need to recover these costs. And I think this actually will work out in their favor because my thinking is they may ultimately have to get a bank loan is the only way to finance that paint hanger. And the $250,000 in design and the foundation and then the improvements themselves of that three-sided hanger, when we sign the lease, it'll in effect be a capital lease, and then they can use that $250,000 as equity, for their project. So they'll have some instant equity in the building. They would like to own some of the buildings, and this would be a great opportunity for them to do that.
Okay. So we've talked about this in our work session last month, so the chair would entertain a motion, and you might want to refer to your board packet, so whoever makes the motion, it's under item number 4. What we're looking for is a cap of $60,000, and this has to do with initial design costs for phase 4 construction of this project, and the recovery cost would be 6%, calculated out over 5 years. So those are probably the key elements we were looking for in the motion. So board would entertain a motion at this time. Board would entertain.
I make the motion that we approve the recommended supplementary rent 2 to be capped at $60,000 at a 6% amortization rate over the next 5 years.
Motion has been made. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Is there discussion on the motion? J.C.
I didn't print the second page, but from my memory and reading it, there was a $5,064 a year income. Was that a year or a month income?
In just ground rent, it would be $564,000 in new ground rent for the new paint hanger.
That's annual.
Our ground rent's only 12 cents a square foot. Is that what it is? Okay, so this would be 14 cents a square foot.
Does that answer your question, Jason?
So that's just paying the interest on there?
It's not enough to pay the
That's
loan.
just paying the interest on the loan?
Well, no, there's a couple things there. So the $250,000, we would be recovering that at $1,000 per month. So their ground rent is going to be $1,000 per month plus the ground rent, which is $5,000 divided by 12. So the majority of the rent will actually be them repaying us back for the design costs.
Right.
Because that hangar is only about, gosh, that thing's not more than 10,000 square feet right now, is it? Or
It's 85 by 100.
so about 8,500 square feet. It's not a big hangar, and so it only occupies 2 acres, roughly. I guess that is. No, it's not even an acre, is it?
No.
Yeah.
560.
Yeah. So it's it's a quarter of an acre or something like that. So the ground rent is fairly piddly, but the repayment of our $250,000 is $1,000 a month.
So I'm still not catching this. So to recoup the $60,000 that we're spending to complete their design,
That's the 919.
we are going to be repaid.
919.
Well, that would be for $50,000. It'd be a little
Actually
bit
more
more than
than
that. It'd be about $1,050, something like that. So the components of their rent, we're going to add the $1,000 for the $60,000. That goes back to phase 1, the existing lease. we actually have already given them an amendment to that lease to approve. And the reason we've done that is if they choose not to go ahead with the paint hanger, about a year and a half ago when we talked about this paint hanger before, the board said they didn't want to extend any more money to AdMax because we had so much out there. So what we're proposing is we'll extend another 60, but we want the amendment first, and you'll start paying rent today on your existing lease for that $60,000. That we've termed out over 5 years so that we get our money back fairly quickly. The $250,000, which was spent back in 2008, right now it's not in anything. We're not recovering any of it. So what we've said is we're going to add that to your ground rent for that phase of development. And we would do that for any tenant that wanted. If Dwight came in tomorrow and decided he wanted to start painting planes, we would say, okay, your ground rent is the $5,000 per year plus $1,000 a month to pay for the foundation and the cost of moving the metal over there and the design cost to complete that hangar.
Something's better than nothing.
Well, and this is really, Brad, I'll tell you what's really good about this is we thought we really had sunk
Yeah,
$250,000.
It had been written off.
Oh, yeah, and then we would never have a chance to get it back, and this is really the best opportunity that we have to recover that money. It's well done, and what's a little confusing is we're talking about two separate leases. We're talking about amending the existing lease on the big concrete hangar, which is number 2 here, and then we're talking about lease number 4, which is will be the new paint hangar when it gets up and running.
Right. There's been some fits and starts on this project. Several times we've been told by AdMax they wanted to start.
Right. Yeah.
So what we've said is before we go out and spend $60,000, why don't we sign the lease amendment and begin collecting the higher rent on your existing lease to ensure that we're going to recoup any additional dollars we put in.
Yeah, this is not the bank of the airport, basically.
Kind of get a hook in
Yeah.
first.
Plus the other thing it does for them is, like I said, when they go to get their loan, that $250,000 it's real equity. I mean, it's the design, it's the foundation, and it's the 3-sided building itself. So when they go out to get their loan, they'll have, that's about a $2 million project, let's say. They'll have right away about 10% equity because we will have included it in their lease through basically a capital lease. So they do right away have an equity investment in that hangar when they go to get a loan.
Okay. Any other questions? Does that answer your question, Brad? Okay. Any other questions regarding the motion on the floor? Any other questions? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed if there be any? Motion passes. Thank you. Number 5, John, I'm going to go ahead because there's been a couple of changes since the work session. If you would walk us through a little bit of what's happened here on the snow building.
There has been, and you should have on your table here a revised project budget for the snow building. And what we've done is, in looking at our finances over the last couple of weeks, we had originally thought we would put the snow building in about 3 phases. And we would come in and try and get 3 bays constructed right away to handle our tow behinds and a couple of our bigger pieces of equipment. It looks like there's a financing window available where we're going to be able to, and that's a later item on the work session, where we're going to be able to refinance some bonds that have a call window in September and then take that equity and complete a 2nd phase on that snow building. So what you can see in the revised February 11th budget is we're showing an increased budget of $2.9 million for that snow building in order to expand it out to include a couple more bays. And so part of that comes from the refinancing. We're planning to borrow additional $500,000 that we've put into that project. And then AdMax has expressed some interest in our upper shop. And we have an appraisal. It hasn't been completed yet, Rod, has it?
No, it hasn't.
Okay, we're expecting any day now an appraisal for our upper shop. AdMax is interested in it, and if they would purchase that, then what we would do is we would build new shops for our staff down at the new snow shed, so we could get them moved down to the new shed. Eventually we want to do that anyway, but by selling that building or potentially capital leasing that building, we could generate some equity to do that. So we're currently showing the full budget in this capital program of $2.9 million, which would include the equity from AvMax that we would use to build our shops out. And then it would also include about $500,000 in additional funding that would come from debt service on the refinancing. And that gets us to a full budget of 2.9. Our engineer says that with that budget, we should be able to afford, how's that, is it 4 bays plus the offices, kind of what we were thinking?
Yeah.
So we would get, we'd get 4 equipment bays and then 1 bay which we would use for our staff. Move our offices over there. So that's the difference you see in the last month. We got new cost estimates and had that meeting with the FAA, and so we revised that budget. The parking budget looks like it's going to be fine at that $300,000, which is also on the agenda too. Those estimates came in right around where we thought they would. And with that, we can build about 300 stalls. The projects where we are right now, the federal government with sequestration can't give us a real certain schedule of when grant dollars are going to be available. This is also a problem with the RSIP program for this year. Right now, it seems like people are saying there might be grant dollars in May. That's seems to be the consensus. There's a meeting with the FAA next week down in Butte that Rod and Laura will be at. And at that point, we should get maybe an update on when they think dollars will be available. So our hope would be we get a grant in May. We will have the design in good shape by then, and probably will have bid the project out. Usually the FAA wants bids by May 15th, I think. Then we would get that grant, start construction. The other thing that we're doing with that snow shed is that we'll also drag the utilities down the frontage road. So those utilities will be sized to allow development of the Falls Gateway project, which is a retail project next to the jail. And then it would also be sized to handle future development of the GA area down near Front Range. So we get, we get to spend those dollars 3 times on the utilities, more or less. It'll open up a lot of acreage. And I think the utilities on this project we're estimating around $650,000, is it not? So that is a sizable portion of the project budget.
And you're looking for authority to go ahead and you need approval to spend up to $500,000 of.
What we want to do now is just, I think the best thing would be just to approve the projects. I mean, obviously, we'll be coming back to the board with budget authority, but where we are in the capital program right now is we're representing to the FAA that these are our projects for the year. I'm less concerned about the budget because we'll get to bring that back to the board as we refine through 50% design to 90% design. And then we're also telling the airlines, in fact, we've sent to the airlines these projects for the year. So I think what I would say is for the capital program, I think we should just approve the capital projects with the understanding we'll come back for specific budget approval.
Okay, so you're talking about both the snow building and the parking lot.
Right.
Okay. All right, so we've got 2 separate motions we're going to need here. Let's take the first one, which would be the snow equipment building, and we're looking for authority to go move forward with the project with the understanding that staff will come back for budgeting authority and expenditure authority in a subsequent meeting. So Chair would consider at this time a motion for the snow equipment building.
I would so move, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second? Okay, the motion is on the floor to move forward with the snow equipment building, and there has been a second. Is there discussion on the motion? J.C.
Well, my question before we got the revised paper here at the meeting was, why not just abandon all the old buildings and move everything down there now and be done with it? And that's kind of what you're saying.
We're trying to. We don't quite have the dollars. If you look at the capital program, we're showing $3 million basically this year, and then we're coming back in about 2 or 3 years and spending another $700,000. And the $700,000 would buy 2 bays, and those would be equipped as mechanics bays. And at that point, we could move everything down there. What we're building right now is basically the storage that'll replace the 3-sided building we're using now, and the get the equipment we leave outside, like the snow blades. Like the tow behind right now, the first one we bought, we have to take the blade off, leave it outside, and then the truck fits in there if we unhook the tow broom, and the tow broom goes in another bay. So there's 3 pieces laying there, and the guys have to put that all together the day before the storm.
Yeah. My point is that a lot of times then on original construction, if you just go ahead and bite the bullet and do it, it costs you far less than adding on and adding on and adding on. Besides the fact that's really valuable land down there for rent. Land at the other end isn't worth much of anything.
Yeah, and we think the total the total engineer's cost, I think if we do everything at once, was nearly $4 million.
Yeah, it was just over 4 to kind of build the Cadillac.
Which we just don't, we don't have all the dollars. So what we're doing is we're moving the storage capacity down there now. And then we're going to try to get the offices in down there too if we end up selling the shop. And that would be about $3 million. And then we got to come back in a few years and spend another $750,000 to get the mechanics shop down there. But at a minimum, we definitely want to get that equipment inside and in one piece. We think we can do that and move our guys down there next year if we get that $300,000 or so from selling the shop.
Basically doing two semesters, but can't do that at once. Laura, would you make a note to send me an electronic copy since I do all my
Sure.
files electronically?
Any further questions on the motion? Anyone? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed if there be any? Motion passes. Final action item would be a motion for the parking lot expansion. And John, maybe just briefly, I think we've covered that a lot, but just maybe hit the real high points. And also what you've seen here recently in the local trends in the last couple of 2-3 weeks.
Surprisingly, when we got to Christmas, the parking lot overflowed again. We had 25% more stalls. Over about 200 new stalls on a lot of 900, and yet we still filled it. And so as we got into February, the lot continued to fill, and as we got into President Week, we were well into the extension areas. The old employee lot, which was the first extension we did last year, filled completely, and then the new extension out towards the trees at the back of the lot, that got probably, I'd say, about 60% full at one point. And so, we continue to fill the parking lot. And I think part of the reason for that is we've been advertising extensively in Canada. And I think what we're seeing is as our rates have come down, our airline rates, we're seeing a transition from Great Falls traffic, local traffic, with the deployments and things slowing down, to folks from other areas of Montana. I know the parking lot and the TSA have both noticed people from Bozeman, Billings, Kalispell in greater numbers, and we saw that in the parking numbers from last year. And then in addition to that, an onslaught of Canadians brought down by our advertising. So it's good, we generate a lot more revenue, but I think we are going to need more parking capacity. So what we plan to do is that lot next to the water tower, that's just to the south of the water tower there, we plan this summer with that $300,000 to go out and grade that flat, add sub-base, and do a lift of probably 3 to 4 inch asphalt so we can use that lot for overflow. We talked to Republic yesterday or the day before, and they plan on using a drop box system like Helena does for their whole parking lot for revenue control. So in other words, when you park in there, they would note your license plate number. You would take an envelope, hopefully you pay on the honor system. If you don't, they send you a reminder that, hey, you parked at the airport for about this many days. Would you please remit the bill, remit payment? So that would be a very low cost revenue control system. In about 2 years, what we plan to do, and again, we've moved these plans forward. They were out there about 4 to 5 years in the capital plan, is take the airport exit, move it over to where the parking lot, where the airplane parking is today, the old Mang petting zoo there, where their old planes are. That would be the airport exit. Basically it would swerve by the rental car lot, or the rental car wash, pick up that road that goes next to the rental car wash. We would soften those curves to probably a 25 or 30 mile an hour curve, and then we would curve it back again, soften the curve, and then exit right next to those airplanes. That would incorporate that big water tower lot into the main parking lot. Then the existing exit roads would become the back of the primary lot, and the toll plaza could go right there with a nice long run, which would give us lots of queuing. And then there would be a separate exit and entrance into the water tower lot right there off of that road. It would just simply, you'd go up that road and bend to the right and exit back into the toll plaza. For a few years, we would likely operate that as an economy lot at a lower price point. As it fills up and we use that lot full-time, we would probably just merge it right into the same rate structure as the existing lot. And then for the long term, over time, it's likely that we would have to expand an additional parking lot. The spot we kind of look at is over here, off the the ramp area in this grassy area over there in between us and Holman's big hangar. As really the only expansion potential we have right here in the core. Over there, I think it looks like there's probably close to 600 stalls. The water tower lots, our engineer says is good for about 350. That would more than double what we have today. So our hope would be at that point, we'd be looking at maybe a remote lot and a van, and the operation would probably be big enough that we could begin to afford something like that. Or you take the opposite approach and you just begin jacking up the parking rates and let the private market deal with where the parking capacity goes. By the hotels begin, step up their shuttle operations, and as they can make a commercial return, someone probably opens a private lot.
All right. Did we put a motion out on this one yet?
We haven't, no.
All right, so this time Chair would consider a motion for authority to move forward on the parking lot expansion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to the motion. Any discussion regarding the motion on the table, JC?
We have one more problem we need to probably take a look at. Since my most recent incident, I've become quite vigilant of every traffic entering the highway. And I was up at Holman yesterday, and when I was coming back out, there was cars coming out of the angled field right-of-way turn out of our parking lot. And by God, they weren't watching. You know, it comes out to a single lane, and they're not looking back to see if anybody else is there. We may need to look at adding a second lane for a merge lane into the traffic lane.
And in that project budget that we've got for the project in 2015 to expand the parking lot and make these modifications. In fact, I think they're even shown on the drawing, on that little drawing there. What we're planning to do is to widen that lane and protect it, so that lane would be when you come out of the that's not shown on there, but when you make that right, which would be the toll plaza at that point, so that'll meter the traffic anyway. But what we would do is protect that lane all the way down the front of that parking lot there, and then there would be another merge from the airport exit. So you would get an additional lane all the way down there, so that we can protect that exit, because it is an issue. And I think that would solve it. So we'll give you you'll basically be able to make that turn, protect it. No one's moving into your lane. We could probably candle that, with 3 candles or something to keep somebody that's coming down there from merging India. And then you would have a run of a couple hundred feet to make that move to the left to get out of that lane. And then we do the same thing at the airport exit, candle it again, carry that lane probably all the way down towards Mang, and then give you another move back over. So yeah, that is, we've in that same project, we're planning to deal with that same issue of the merges, because it is kind of dangerous today. We've cut back the plants and moved some rocks over there to try to increase the visibility, but some people just don't look. It's not a matter they can't see, they're just not looking.
Well, he didn't at all.
Yeah.
And I ended up having to get in the opposing traffic lane to keep from getting hit.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed if there be any? Motion passes. Airport Authority Board comments. Commissioner Evans.
Delighted to be here.
Glad to have you. It's a lot of stuff going on up here, isn't there?
There is.
Yeah. Well, welcome. Good to have you here. Commissioner Talcott.
I have no further comments.
Commissioner Tropila.
Kudos to the staff for the fine work they do.
Good job, absolutely. JC.
Has there been any progress on our land leasing?
On the retail, we've continued to talk to the one developer that we had come up here to visit us, and we've been trying to arrange a visit to see his project in Boise. We haven't been able to set that up yet, so we're not sure if that's an issue of them just not being interested, or they're really busy and on the road. So we continue to pursue that. The broker that we'd signed the contract with has a second developer out of Denver, and we've asked for them to go ahead and schedule a meeting up here so that they can look at the property. So we're hoping to get that done here in the next month or two. If those efforts don't pan out by late spring, we've been talking a little bit about issuing another RFP, to go out and look for a new broker to represent that property. And I think what we would likely do this time is probably aggressively move up the compensation. We were thinking, today we're not getting any rent off that property. If we did some type of deal where the rental proceeds revert to the broker for the first couple of years, maybe even 3 years or something, then that way there's incentive to get the property developed. So we've been talking to a developer friend of mine that I worked with on some property we had at SeaTac when I was there, and he helped me some with the business park that we developed in Colorado Springs, to try to come up with a strategy that would work fairly well. But I think that's what it's going to take. The main problem right now is a lot of the retailers are still very leery about developing in the economic cycle. I think casual dining, is probably really ripe for Great Falls right now, but the bigger retailers, the Lowe's, the Kohl's, they're still cutting back on development plans more than they're expanding. We did talk to Costco too in the last month, and they still continue to say they need to see more growth in the market before they'd be real interested. So I think we're just kind of still early in that development cycle where the retailers just aren't real anxious to get going. It probably takes a fairly aggressive broker to continue to work on that constantly to try and convince them that Great Falls is a good bet. But I still think all the feedback we're getting is that it's a good site for that type of development. So, but no, I think we're probably at that point where we need to start thinking about a new strategy and considering maybe a different broker.
Anything else, JC? Commissioner Robinson?
Yeah, I would too like to welcome Commissioner Evans. She's done a lot of community work, an awful lot of community work, and she's done very fine work. I have no doubt she'll do an excellent job here too.
Thank you. The only comment I have, again, I appreciate the support of the board. I'd like to thank the staff for the great work they did and continue to do, especially through this construction phase. I just wanted to mention that I took a flight out of here a week ago yesterday, and Tim, who's head of the TSA, came up and just had nothing but praise about the way that the airport has managed the security here at the airport while we're going through this construction phase. There's not been one incident, and he just said that starting with staff, John and Kent and everyone involved, just been excellent teamwork. So I just kudos for it's hard to balance all this, and he was very complimentary, and he went out of his way to bring that up. So
I appreciate that, and certainly Guy Tabaco's done a really good job. We told him two things he had to be serious about was security and keeping the debris off of that back construction area, because it could easily be ingested, and that is one of the cleaner sites I think I've ever seen. We told him if it's something you don't want to, you'll try to catch with your hand doing 80 miles an hour, then it doesn't belong on the ground out there. And they've taken that pretty seriously.
So it's been great. So congratulations on that. All right. Any public comment? Ben.
Okay, my name's Ben. Most of you people know me. I'm formally on this board. I'd like to have the board consider this at one of their work sessions, and that is the ILS Category 3 runway. There was 6 years of dedication by a former employee here, our former director, to make that a reality and put Great Falls on the map. It is proved to be a very good marketing tool for this board, for Director Faulkner, and all future boards and all future directors. I think that Cynthia Schultz's name should be associated with that runway. The reason I'm coming now, after all these years, is one, at the time of my departure from the board and my chairmanship, I had personal business I had to take care of and didn't get around to it before I left. As most of you know, I've just started to be able to find time to come back to some of the meetings now. Also, I noticed that the FedEx building was dedicated to Jerry Ferda, because Jerry was instrumental in getting that up and going and getting FedEx here. That being a valuable asset to the airport is one thing, but the runway will be here forever. And I do know the 6 years that I spent on the board, Cynthia worked on the financing, the grants. She and Rod worked hand in hand with the airlines to schedule the right size planes, to be able to use the alternate runways when necessary. I do think it would be very appropriate to dedicate that Category 3 ILS runway to Cynthia Schultz. On a side note, a personal note, as many of you may or may not know, I've been working temporarily as a snow removal technician for the airport during snow events, and it is somewhat of a pride thing to hear security call on the company radio to the supervisor and say that there's a possibility that flights from Minneapolis going to Billings and Bozeman would be diverted here. I like to think that a good portion of that is because of that runway. I also like to think that the other part of that is the dedicated permanent employees and crew that keep this airport and the airfield up. And Rod, you got a great crew. So anyway, those are my comments. I would seriously like the board to consider some sort of dedication to Cynthia Schultz for her work that she put in 6 years of bringing that runway here.
All right, thank you, Ben, for your comments. Appreciate that. Anything else from the public? Anything at all? All right, anything from staff? We'll go ahead and adjourn to the work session. We'll start that at 2:30, so we'll make it a short break here, and we'll start right at 2:30. Thank you. Oh, let's make it 2:35. We'll give Peter an extra 5 minutes here.
Oh, that's a question. It's easier if I come around?
Yeah, well, either way.
Yes,
Start with these. Yes.
okay, so we've got this.
I'm
You're
working
getting
on
on
this.
that.
Yeah. Why don't you give me quite a stack of this, you know?
I know. This is a good one.
Here's the city or county.
Yeah.
What's that?
Camp Evans, a city or county? And is that a 2-year term or?
County. County.
Is she county?
County.
She's county?
Yes.
You're right.
Do my
It is
math,
county.
so it's 4 and,
It is
yeah,
county.
it's county, yeah.
Thank you. Saved us.
Thank you. That's right, because I emailed Joe and asked him if he got any answers.
Okay. What Catherine said is about half the time and half the cost. So tell me, what's the cost approximately? Is it 25 now?
Yeah, well, the construction budget is 5.7. 5.6.
About half of the 5.6. But is that, but how about engineering and everything?
Yeah, the total budget's about 6.7. Which, of course, the engineering is also.
Is that more valuable? You said it's about half.
I'd say, yeah, that's fine, 6.7 and about half.
When will be
We will probably move into the checkpoint in July or August timeframe, and then the project will be complete in December.
We can do more about this stuff later. The tower project, or the tower studies, at one point you said that the preliminary recommendation is it would close at 8 to 5 a.m., and another point you said 6, you know, or maybe I misheard.
It's 5 or 6. I think it reopens at 6. Yeah, I think it's 6, 8 to 6.
There aren't many planes that get here early in the morning, so it's